All right, I have today Colonel Tony Shaffer with me to talk about what's going on in the Russia-Ukraine war, what's going on with Vladimir Putin, Zelensky, new details about the Nord Stream pipeline, and also a little bit about the United States military. Colonel Shaffer, thank you so much for coming on today's show.
Stephen, always great to be with you. I appreciate the time that you give me with your audience, which apparently is very responsive to our conversation. So I
Yes.
always enjoy our being here with you. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So let me start off with this one. A United Kingdom's Shadow Storm missile has been confirmed to have killed one of Putin's top generals, a man by the name of Sergei Goryachev.
Mhm.
This is one of the biggest kills on the Russian side to date. Do you see the Shadow Storm missile from the United Kingdom being a game changer for Ukraine down the road since it can travel at 600 miles an hour? Or will it or a similar weapon be used against Russia and provoke a larger conflict since now Russia is saying any attacks on Mother Russia, they will hold Ukraine accountable and the country that supplied the weapon that hurt sovereign Russia. What are your thoughts on this?
So there already have been attacks on Russia by Ukraine. There's been credible articles talking about trains being attacked and derailed. So I understand what Putin is trying to do. Basically, is trying to say enough's enough. Um, we're not going to tolerate this because they have tolerated it to now. And let me just make a blanket statement regarding the Storm missile. It doesn't matter. Not a single weapon system, not a single new technology, not a single airframe is going to make any difference to the overall war effort. Um, the the idea that some silver bullet is going to be that thing which finally allows Ukraine to win and Russia to lose is beyond insane. And I've heard this from a number of people who are seen as academically credible. And I was like, roll my eyes, like, really? Oh, we just need F-16s. Oh, we just need M8, M1 A1 tanks. Oh, we just need this. No, 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 no. That is insanity. It is literally national security malpractice to continue to promote the idea that a single weapon system is going to be the game changer for something, especially when, if you just look at the numbers, Stephen, the Russians have the numbers. They have the overall technology parity. They don't have necessarily the edge. They don't need it because they are now on a war footing. They've produced more resources in the last 6 months that they can live off of for the next year if they have to, versus Ukraine, who is still scrambling to try to get enough resources, enough artillery rounds to do daily exchanges with the Russians. The numbers are not there. The leadership is not there. And that is on the Ukraine side. So no matter how many seniors they kill using great technology, it doesn't matter. It's not going to matter in the end. It's all about a numbers game at this point. And I always remind people, because I always get accused of being pro-Putin. I'm not. I'm not pro-Russian. My job is to call balls and strikes. Right now, it's the bottom of the eighth, and Ukraine is not doing well. And it's a sad fact, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Staying on that topic, we've been hearing for months now about this spring offensive, how
Yeah.
there could be hidden Ukrainian armies, that the different, 30 plus nations of NATO have been stockpiling weapons to send in at the last minute. Um, you've been in battle, you've put together battle, theater, laying things out for
Done all
different
that stuff.
battles.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is the spring offensive going? Um, I know some people are trying to say, oh, well, it was about to take off, and
Yeah.
then this
No.
this dam was blown up, and so that's the damn problem with the spring offensive. But what do you see as someone with a military mind? What's really happening?
I think the dam was an excuse for the Ukrainians to say, "Oh, geez, it really gets in the way of our offensive because they're not ready." And the reason they're not ready is because they've been listening to Victoria Nuland. And a little hint, I've been saying this in interviews, a little pro hint, Never let the U.S. State Department plan a military battle. Not a good idea. And that's exactly what's happened here. So regarding the overall premise of warfare, the overall premise of warfare is to, I think Clausewitz once said it was diplomacy by other means or something like that. And this is what it is. Basically, you're trying to affect the adversary by creating a series of violent events that will enable you to dictate to them political conditions. It ain't going to happen here to do the Joe Biden thing. It's not in the cards. It's not in the cards. And here's why. Mark Milley yesterday during his press conference, as the time it was, our taping, Mark Milley said this yesterday, that he was proud of the fact that all these Ukrainians were being trained in dozens of countries and, a multitude of weapon systems. And this shows how this diversity of training and is going to be the thing that wins. It's not. It's the opposite. One of the things you need, Stephen, to be effective in combat is unit cohesion. And I'm talking about unit cohesion from the guys in the platoon all the way up to the guys in the corps and army. It has to function as an organism. Your body functions in a way that everything is synchronized. You have the heart, lungs, everything has to work. You have to have the same thing on the battlefield. And when you have people trained all over the world in a dozen different military philosophies, on a dozen different military weapon systems, with a dozen different logistical requirements and management systems, it's chaos. It's all it is. It's virtue signaling. It's woke military. That's, as a matter of fact, my friend Blaine Holt and I did an article on this week. And Milley illustrated exactly what we meant by that you are spending more time trying to show that you have diversity of effort rather than cohesion and capability to win. That's why they are not going to win. They are now, I would say, the Ukrainians have been inflicted by the Western philosophy of woke militarism is what's going on here. If you wanted to win, Stephen, you pick 5 different weapon systems that you can support indefinitely with a lot of weapons, a lot of technology, a lot of resupply, with people who are well equipped, well trained on it, know it front and back, have about 6 months of training on the equipment, then 6 months of training working together, and then you put it all together in a big exercise where it all comes together. That's what we did for Normandy. It's what we did for our plans for retaking Europe, called Reforger during the Cold War. It's what we did in the Pacific to win against the Japanese. We know what it takes to win, but the policy is to not do those things we know, which it takes to win. So that tells me then, we don't want to win. I don't know. You can leave it to you and your audience to make your own decision, but I don't think anybody in the West is serious about winning by the fact that they continue to avoid making choices that would actually put the Ukrainians on a path of winning.
Okay, thank you. Let's switch gears for a second.
Sure.
The United States has announced that they are deploying fighter jets to the Middle East to deal with Russia, who keeps pushing the brink of the U.S. military boundaries.
Yeah.
Do you see this potentially escalating between the United States and Russia?
I do.
Or is this just par for the course in this area? And then follow-up question, why is the United States still in Syria? I've had a lot of people want me to ask that.
Yeah. Let's start with Syria first. One of the senior Pentagon officials I advised during the Trump years wanted us out of there. I'll leave the person's name out of it for now, but I can tell you this person ran things pretty much. And his opinion was anywhere we deploy and people are meandering around, just doing a few things with a lot of time on their hand, mission creep sets in. So basically, if you send someone somewhere, they're going to start looking for more things to do. So this person said, we don't want that. There's no reason for us to be in Syria. There's no there for us. And yet the other hint of this was people like McMaster and Dave Petraeus, who wanted us to put 500,000 troops in there. As a matter of fact, I know for a fact in Syria. John McCain, back when he was alive, was trying to push a number of folks to deploy troops, to include H.R. McMaster, walked into Trump's office, I know this for a fact, and twice made the recommendation that we deploy 500,000 troops into Syria. And I can tell you that the Joint Chiefs were not digging it. Trump didn't dig it, but that's what was happening. So the reason we're still there is because the bureaucratic state wants us still there. That's why. Because even when Trump gave orders to Mark Milley to pull us out, they didn't do it.
Okay.
Dereliction of duty. I have a number of issues with Mark. That's one of them right there. I know for a fact that order was issued, and that the Pentagon decided, yeah, we're not going to do that. So that's why we're still in Syria, because of the Leviathan of the Pentagon's inner bureaucracy, also known as the deep state. That's why we're still there. It makes no sense for us to be there at this point. There's nothing there for us, and plus the Russians are there pretty much more than we are, and they were invited, we weren't. So I think there's some issues there. Now, going back to the next question regarding Russia and us, while I am not a neocon, I do believe that we have to understand that Vladimir Putin is speaking to us in the language of the Cold War. That language requires response. That requires credible response. Those credible responses must be linked to either a policy that we want to reinforce or a policy we want to dissuade them from adopting. If you do nothing, they will take that as concurrence with their actions, and they'll expand on. The Russians have a saying: my experience with the Russians are, what's ours is ours, and what's yours is negotiable. That's just the way the Russians do business. So if you allow them to run the table, they will. So I don't want to be aggressive. It's like, no, there's certain things I think we have to push back on to recognize that we are not going to allow you to do that. By the way, the whole reason the Russians invaded when they did Ukraine is because they saw weakness in Joe Biden. Joe Biden even said, if they take a little bit, that's okay. That show of weakness is why the invasion was so badly organized, because it was just like, oh, let's just go do it. It's going to be easy because they said we could do it. Well, it was wrong. But that's the thing. You need to have credible deterrence. And right now, Joe Biden is not seen as someone credible. He allowed the Chinese to run all over us and a number of things, to include the Chinese balloon thing. We're going to see how this meeting this weekend goes, Stephen, with Tony Blinken. I don't think it's going to go well. He's over there in China right now. But that's my point, is that the longer you show, the more you show weakness, display weakness, the more adversaries will think they can do whatever they want and get away with it. And that's why we have to push back at certain times. That's why we have to remind Putin, don't use a nuclear weapon. There are going to be consequences, because that's why he keeps saying he's going to use nuclear weapons, because he thinks he can get away with it. And there's nobody credibly saying, no. You don't want to do that. And here's why. Reagan, Stephen, this is, you and I talked a little bit about our political philosophies. I loved Reagan by the fact that everybody thought Reagan was just crazy enough to do something. It's like, so that craziness actually had a good effect as a part of our credible deterrence, and that credible deterrent process is just not in place as far as I can see. I'm hoping the deployment of aircraft with some level of credible, like, here's the line, don't cross it, is something that may even help dissuade the Russians from doing some of the more aggressive things I think they're contemplating at this point.
So in the military theater, and I don't have the proper vernacular, but it would be more appropriate for the United States to engage Russia in Syria than in Ukraine.
So I don't necessarily think we should be engaging them in Syria. I think Syria, we should be pulled out. I think there's other parts of the world where there's competition that we should be looking at. So the idea that we're going to double down in Syria is not necessarily something we should do. I understand there's points we're going to have to basically confront the Russians to say, we're not willing to accept your aggressiveness. And I'm not in those rooms right now, obviously, in the Pentagon, as I used to be advising folks regarding planning and outcomes. But at this point, I think we need to pick our battles carefully. We have to pick them. We must engage in them, but we should not be a bully. But at the same time, we need to make it very clear that there's certain things that are not acceptable to us and our allies. And again, Biden has been back and forth all over the map on this. I don't think anybody considers Biden to be a credible steward of our foreign policy.
Yeah. Do you think when President Biden publicly said that if Russia took a little bit of Ukraine, it would be okay, do you think at any point he thought they would take upwards of 20% of Ukraine? Or like, do you think he had a percentage? Because 20% is a pretty big chunk of a country.
Yeah. All right. So I've said this in other interviews. I'm just going to cut through it. This war is about resources. It's all it's about. I don't care what they say about, oh, we want to rescue people in the Donbass. Nonsense. Putin is a thug. He is a guy who has gone about creating a protective ring around him with oligarchs. He's bought off everybody in the nation. The man is a complete mafioso, aka a czar, a modern czar. The Russian system, the Russian people accept strong leadership figures. It is what it is. I'm not here to judge their system. Putin is fine for the system in which he exists. So again, don't take my comments as being pro-Russian. I'm not. I'm simply telling you my assessment of how that system works. It works for them. So when you look at what would benefit Putin regarding how he governs, well, one of the things that they depend upon, they being the Russians, is a certain amount of income coming into the country. That income primarily is driven at this point by oil, by selling oil. I've said a number of times to include on your show, if Biden really wanted to take the wind out of Putin's sails, take the bottom out of oil, just go to the level of production where you're dropping a barrel down to $20. You defund Putin instantly. Instantly, it's gone. But we don't want to do that because the green fiction, which we should talk about some other time. Anyway, Putin saw in 2014 when the color revolution happened, and he talked about this publicly about his perception. I'm telling you, his perception, the coup. He believes a coup happened in Ukraine, not me, him. That changed the direction, the trajectory of Ukraine from being in the pro-Russian sphere to the EU sphere. The moment that happened, those resources that were discovered in the Donbass and the Black Sea that were of I guess at the back of a better term, gas, natural gas, and oil. Those reserves would have been essentially under the sphere of Russian control, except after 2014, it was going to go into the EU sphere of control. When that happened, that's when the real serious effort by Putin kicked in, because the last thing Putin wants or will accept is a net competitor regarding the export of Russian oil and gas. That's it. This is what this is all about. Putin sees the future where the Ukraine, because of its massive resources, could become a net competitor with Russia. He's not going to tolerate that. That's why they've gone about doing things they did over the past 10 years, coming up on 10 years now. Think about this. It's not happened overnight. They've been telegraphing what they're willing to accept and not accept, and nobody was listening. Again, I'm not on his side. I'm just telling you what happened. So finally, he sees weakness in the form of Biden and decides now is the time to go. I'm going now because I'm going to secure those resources. So to your point, how much does he want? He wants as much as necessary to secure and make sure that those oil and gas resources are never used as competition against Russia.
Interesting. That's a totally different perspective.
It is.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Dr. Michael Rubin at the American Enterprise Institute has written that he believes National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is covering up the amount of weapon flow from China to Russia in order to hurt Ukraine. Do you think there's any truth to this?
I do.
This idea, and if so,
yeah,
why would Jake Sullivan be covering this up? Is it actually to protect China?
Yes. The bottom line is yes, it's to protect China. Everything is about protecting China to the current administration. That's why they've said nothing. One of the times you and I spoke recently was about the fact that the Chinese put on the table a peace plan, 10 points, I think. The Biden administration did nothing to get ahead of that. They knew it was coming, but said nothing. Why would you do that? Why would you allow the Chinese to take the initiative? That's what I'm saying. Clearly, that's what happened. They were deferring to China. And I do believe what he's saying to be true, not because of what he says, because Gordon Chang, one of our distinguished fellows, I love Gordon. Gordon and I are often on this. Gordon has said that there are aircraft flying out of Beijing every day with high tech going to Russia every day. that this administration won't talk about. Now, I think it's a shame, because I think we need to be talking about it, because the China is, I think, taking a far more active role in this war than is being led on. And it's not in our interest to just let that sit there. But I think the policy is at this point to defer to China on everything, to just bend over and take it, so to speak. Not, I don't want to be too
Yeah. Well, that kind of,
descriptive, but
yeah, that kind of goes back to your theory on resources, because Colonel McGregor and Scott Ritter have both said that China desperately wants Ukraine so that they can send trains, they can get their Belt and Road Initiative in
absolutely
to Eastern Europe and into
absolutely
Western Europe, but that has to go through Ukraine. And so they have a lot of financial incentives. Ukraine is a major resource for their Belt and Road Initiative. So
absolutely.
that actually lines up very, very well.
So expand a little bit further on this point. Did you hear recently that the Pakistanis, who has been one of our allies, actually is buying Russian oil despite the embargoes? Were you aware of that?
I was not, no.
So are you aware also that how they paid for that oil? Want to take a guess what currency they used?
Our US dollar?
No.
No. The yuan?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all about resources. It's all about the economics. And anybody who tells you different doesn't understand how the world works.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. Under the Biden administration, just so much has changed. The perception of America, the strength of America, allowing China to lead out, allowing China to be the ones that possibly bring peace versus, like, many are saying that Joe Biden wants to run his second term as a wartime president.
Absolutely. I
But
said this with Jack Persobic the other day. Yesterday. We just talked about this yesterday. Absolutely.
but the American people don't want war.
No.
So why would they respect him as a wartime president? Wouldn't it be better to be the I got us out of wartime president?
Well, that's my philosophy, and I think Trump feels the same way. I mean, I believe prosperity comes from international cooperation and building markets. I'm a free market guy. I think we ought to have more people, not less, involved in the free market. I think everybody should be engaged in the free market. And it's not like, oh, exploiting people. No, it's actually allowing people to use their God-given skills to benefit themselves. It's not, it's like, how do you not see this anyway? By the way, just quick point on that. American exceptionalism. We are not better than the rest of the world. American exceptionalism is all about the fact that, to your point, what we're talking about, you can come here and be an exceptional American by allowing the very intelligence and your essence to grow and prosper. That's what American exceptionalism is. You can come here from anywhere and become an American and prosper. That's what the key is. American exceptionalism. It's about the fact you can come here and be American and be successful. So people get it wrong all the time. But to that point, then, if you're actually engaged in these things to increase value, the value proposition, if you will, we often get lost in the weeds of not allowing for individuals to do those things, to be successful. And I think that's where creating conditions for peace, not war, benefits more people than less. What benefits from that which benefits from war is the military industrial congressional complex, Stephen, the thing that Eisenhower warned us about. So I think that's the danger. I think Biden is ultimately wanting to go with the neocons, trying to create a war economy, and the perception, he believes that he wants to be the FDR of his generation and do this. And I don't think the reason he does it because he doesn't care about humanity. He doesn't care about people. The progressive left, as far as I can tell, don't care about people. It's all about perception, managing perception, and benefiting those who have helped them get into positions of power, and then maintaining that power once they're there.
Yeah. It just dawned on me why he wants to be seen as a wartime president. It has nothing to do with the people or the voter, because it's the donors that get you elected.
Yes.
And so he wants to be the wartime president for the military industrial congressional complex.
That's correct, sir. You are correct, sir.